It's amazing how long censorship has been around. It didn't start with Joe Biden by any stretch of the imagination. It didn't even start with communism. Tyrants, evil people who can't sell their ideas to the masses simply try to control them. That's what they do. Evil people abound, and evil people who want to do evil things will always try to control what you can see, hear, and say. Joining me now to talk about this and many things, my friend Jeffrey Tucker, founder and president of the wonderful Brownstone Institute. Jeffrey, censorship may have been pushed into overdrive in this country under President Joe Biden, if we're still pretending he was president, but it didn't begin with him. The communists in particular have loved it forever. They need it.
We don't know how long we've lived in a censored world. I suspect it's been for most of our lives, actually. It's true that we didn't have the technology in the past to know everything in real time and to get a diverse range of views. I grew up in a world with 3 television stations that all had the same thing, and nobody really had much hunger for news beyond that. On the other hand, we kind of trusted the system. We figured that everything worked just fine. And nobody really questioned it. But now, with technology came along to make everybody a reporter, to have citizen journalism, as Elon says. And it's like the ruling class just panicked and said, "Okay, no, we're going to make the internet work exactly the way television worked in the 1970s." And the Biden administration even put out a document to that effect called Declaration on the Future of the Internet, in which they imagined a world of stakeholders working with governments. So that's what they were going to do. And then they would have gotten away with it too, but for Elon Musk and the purchase of Twitter and turning it into X has just blown up in the entire world and done much more besides. So now we're facing this kind of astonishing information flood on an increasing level, and we can't even believe what we're seeing. It's every day is kind of mind-blowing, and the lesson is always the same: that we've been lied to, we've been robbed, we've been pillaged, and that there's an overclass out there that has long lived at our expense. So that seems like the upshot of what we're learning, and every day and every minute has just been an unfolding of that truth.
Jeffrey, this may sound off topic, maybe it is off topic, but hearing you describe it in that way, you know what bugs me is I love history. I'm a history freak. I geek out on ancient history, but to World War II, you name it. I'm a history geek. I guess that's part of getting old and gray. I just love history. And the older the history gets, the fewer and fewer sources you get for any one story. In World War II, you're going to have a bunch of sources, but the Battle of Troy, you would have one. Did it even happen, right? How much of the history that I know and love, that maybe you know and love, that people watching know and love, how much of the history of the world is just a flat out lie?
It's amazing that you put it that way and that you say it that way. That is exactly what I've been thinking. And we have to rethink kind of everything, from the fall of Rome through everything. And I can't get enough of this now. And probably you're in the situation I am, where I'm just in a constant state of incredulity, oh, that's what you say happened. What really happened, and from the Brownstone point of view, we're mainly dedicated to figuring out the history of the last 5 years, and it is not easy. I can tell you, it's kind of a nonstop investigative effort, and it's truly overwhelming. And it would have been impossible without all these new tools that we have. But even with them, we're still trying to piece it together. To say nothing of, the Cold War, the Latin American wars of the 1980s, Vietnam, Korea. Just go back in time, and who knows what it is we don't know. And then we had this document dump from the CIA, because in Washington, if you've hung around Washington enough, you figure this out, that there's 2 information streams. I mean, one is what the public knows, and the other is the classified information stream, and there's a firm barrier between those two things. And Trump was advocating for the release of these JFK files, and he pushed for it. Last time he pushed for it. This time he put out an executive order demanding it, and it still wasn't coming. It still wasn't coming. So finally, he went to the JFK Performing Arts Center, the Kennedy Performing Arts Center, and announced that they would be coming, sending the entirety of the Washington establishment into overdrive panic. And they dumped all these documents, withholding some, and they weren't even entirely sure, according to the New York Times anyway. The New York Times is panicked about this. They were not even sure entirely what it is that they dumped, and we're getting our first look at it now. And of course, it turns out the CIA, the operations of the CIA are revealed within these documents, confirming your worst fears. But that's the way we're getting the information out. So I guess to some extent, I feel like there's no chance we're ever going to put this genie back in the bottle, and I'm quite frankly glad about that.
How does the normal person, how do they navigate this new world? Because you brought up Elon Musk and X and social media and Trump and the JFK files, and right. So okay, now we went from having a few very tightly controlled sources by evil people to now, and it's endless. Now, at this point in time, if you want to drink water, you have to drink from a fire hydrant that's just been opened up. And anyone with any experience in that knows that can be extremely dangerous and hazardous to your health. So if I'm a normal person and I wake up in the morning and I pick up my phone, how do I even start to walk through this world? What do I do?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a completely different world with a kind of a constant dopamine rush, which, as you say, is not actually very helpful about this. It's not helpful for us spiritually and mentally and otherwise. But we've got decades of disinformation to unravel, and those are just the times we live in. And we're going to find out worse and worse things every day. I've been, quite frankly, shocked beyond anything that I ever expected about the revelations from Doge. And I don't think that people have fully processed the implications of what they've said and what they've discovered over the last couple of months. And I mean, like, even a conservative estimate is that 10% of the U.S. Budget is essentially unaccounted for. I mean, that's an unbelievable figure. I mean, we're talking about since the end of World War II, something like what, $20 trillion has come and gone that's not been accounted for.
Oh,
But what do you do with that kind of information? How do you run that down? I don't know. And then you've got the other problem that the Trump administration and the people within the Trump administration that want transparency, that want to get the information out, are facing, attacks from every angle, unrelenting, like every single minute of every day and not to mention threats on their lives, right? And now Elon's faced with having Tesla dealerships burning, and Tesla's burning on the street, and people selling the stock and everything. It's what a time to be alive. Astounding.
yeah. Speaking of, the last 5 years in Brownstone and the work you've been doing, I'll never be able to let it go. Jeffrey, maybe that's the Irish in me, maybe it's just a Kelly thing, but I'm never going to let it go what I watched happen to this country when we got a new virus from China. Honestly, the other day I brought it up online, and I've talked about this on the show before. The fact that every single institution in the United States of America, from the medical institutions to the freaking Central Intelligence Agency, demanded that everybody say it didn't come from a lab when it came from a lab. And again, it's not the lie that's amazing. Why? Why is it every institution in the country decided to together join forces and lock shields against the truth? And that's just one of a million ways they tried to censor out all the honesty, all the true things during COVID.
And the silliness, right? I mean, the 6 feet of distance, the
Oh, God.
censorship, the claims that the vaccine was the magic cure when it clearly was not, and anybody could have known that even without reading the EUA. The extended closures that ruined kids' lives, the destruction of small business, uh, and the silence on the part of elite sectors, in academia and in media and so on. It's incredible. It's an event that discredits an entire generation of legacy institutions, from think tanks to universities to professors to media outlets, and they're terrified for people to talk about it, really. And yet we have to talk about it, and we should not get over it. We need a truth on what happened over the last 5 years, why all this stuff happened, who was behind it, why they engaged in it. Just some truth and honesty. I think we're going to get there, but it's going to take new institutions like Brownstone, and you to make it happen, because the legacy just doesn't. They want it all, gone. The New York Times has only recently started saying basically mistakes were made. And now shut up.
Yeah,
That's
mistakes
essentially
were
it.
made.
But there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more going on, and forget justice. We just need truth.
Yeah. Talk to me about Murphy versus Missouri.
Yeah, the censorship issue. Here's the problem. It's not a problem. Trump has put in an executive order that forbids federal agencies from being involved, and it was a very good executive order in any kind of third party censorship efforts. And that presumably makes that litigation, kind of puts it on the back burner. Um, and meanwhile, that the litigators had worked for years on discovery to get little bits and pieces. Actually, they got about 10,000 pages. But then Zuckerberg comes out and just confesses the whole thing, right? They're just being perfectly honest. Yeah, they censored at the behest of governments. The problem with the executive order is that it's not in law yet, and that litigation is going to be ongoing. But I doubt that we're going to get anything from the Supreme Court out of it. What we really need is some strict legislation from the center, and that would help. At the same time, the censorship goes on. This is part of the problem. All of these platforms, from LinkedIn to Facebook to YouTube, have deep algorithmic structures that were trained to censor. So they no longer needed the pressure from the federal government to do it. And just to give you an example, when Elon took over Twitter, they tried to rip out all the guts of the censorship. But even now, there's certain links and certain things that you find that uh, will trigger X to say, "Oh, you can't post that." But the note goes to the legacy URL, twitter.com, not to X. So you can tell that this is just legacy code still in there. So they've been working for a year to get rid of all the machinery of censorship within the algorithms, and have been unable to do a complete job. And that process at YouTube and Google, and LinkedIn and so on hasn't even begun. So, in effect, we don't have sort of intensifying censorship, but we have legacy censorship is still, a continuing reality at all those platforms. Then you have the problem of the mainstream media, which has a deep culture of political bias and aspirational professionals who know better than to say anything that would expose the racket. So those institutions are kind of done. I mean, what's interesting to me, you have Jeff Bezos over at the Washington Post made a big announcement. We're not going to be biased anymore. We're going to have the op-ed page is going to be filled with. It's going to have content that's in favor of, for example, freedom. Well, that caused resignations all around. Well, we can't do that. That's a terrible idea. And that announcement, I think, was made maybe a month or six weeks ago. Nothing has changed on the op-ed page. So what do you do? I think at some point you're just gonna have to fire everybody. I don't know.
All right. Finally, all this brings me actually to the thing that, to be honest, it frightens me a little bit. And part of it is just because I don't understand it. I'm not a technological person. AI, artificial intelligence. I know what it is. I mean, I know at least the basics of it. I certainly could not explain the code or anything like that behind it, but I get it, what it is. But I'm very, very concerned about the worst people in the world coming up with the new technology that's going to only favor them. It's something that concerns me greatly.
When AI was first came out, and you probably remember this, it was ChatGPT just kind of dropped on the world, and everybody said, "Oh, this is wonderful," and then Google got its own AI, and oh, this is wonderful. But except people quickly discovered it was wildly biased. You remember you tried to get these ChatGPT or one of the other AI engines to draw a picture of founding fathers, and it looked didn't look anything like the founding fathers, so to speak. And the questions were skewed, and it seemed like we were living in an Orwellian world. Well, Grok came along, which is once again Elon Musk, and became an uncensored, unbiased, trainable, non-woke AI engine, and so everybody else just immediately shaped up, right? So it was only that competitive pressure uh, that fix that. So it's like we keep dodging these bullets one by one. But ultimately, the censorship will be baked into AI, and it probably already is at Google and at Facebook and elsewhere. And at that point, the machines run us, and it doesn't require any kind of decision making on the part of any actual human person. So, AI is going to lead to a world where we're fed, nonstop propaganda. And like I say, the only thing that separates us from that is, Grok, one guy and one platform. So it's tremendously scary just how close we came.
No doubt. Jeffrey, as always, thank you, sir. Appreciate you very much. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.